Okay, so after my video where I gave a summary of my thoughts and reflections on the discussion which I had with Binyamin Tsadik a couple of days ago, Binyamin now has recorded his response video. So what I thought would be a good idea is just to, on the spur of a moment, just watch it through and just record my live reaction and see whatever thoughts come into my head during that moment. I thought that might be fun. So yeah, let's watch it now. I haven't watched it yet. I've just literally just got up, put on the camera, recording. Let's see what happens.
Hey, so this is a video response to Jack. Jack came out with his personal opinion on how the debate went, and it's the debate was long. Debate, quote unquote. It was really.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It was sort of yeah, it did become more of a discussion. No, my bad. I think it could have been more of a debate if I had sort of stuck with my original plan, which I had sort of a list of different criticisms which I could have sort of launched into. But I sort of thought to myself, it's probably not fair just to jump into that. It's probably better to get to understand his views more, at least first off. And some people might not appreciate that, which is fair enough. I think it's just sort of what I end up doing. I end up defaulting just to exploring rather than jumping into an attack mode. I think attack mode needs to feel justified first. But with Binyamin, he could easily, of course, turn it back into a debate by challenging me on some socionics points, which he didn't do very much of. I'm not sure it's because he didn't have much to say on the matter. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think for a discussion rather than a debate, I guess it takes two to tango, although I think it's quite a nice tango, really, anyway.
More of a learning experience for Jack. Jack doesn't really know what objective personality is all about. He was asking me questions who I'm not the authority on objective personality, and he sort of mixed my personal opinions with objective personality theory. I saw that from his conclusion video that he came out on the debate. So
well, okay, so if you are not, I think it's reasonable to say you're not the authority. I think Dave and Shannon would be the authority, but you are certainly seen as someone who has a significant amount of expertise on the theory. You've interviewed many people, and people presented you as the person to debate with me on the group. I thought it was fair enough to talk to you. I could talk to Dave and Shannon, but I thought it might be worth, talking to some other people first and maybe working my way up over time. That's something I like to do. In the same way with Model G, I talked to people like Ben Vaselan and Mitchell Newman because I thought going straight for Glencoe straight off the bat, well, I think it's good to have a chance to sort of refine your ideas, get to the nub of the theory first, and have the most refined ideas before you meet the top person, as it were, the person who's created the idea. But yeah, I think that plays out, has more of a narrative, and it's interesting to see different perspectives from people working more from, well, as enthusiasts, and people who then grow up to be more experts, and only then go towards the actual creator. I think it just works better that way. But yeah.
I just want to straighten a few of those things out. So first and foremost, TE being a tribe function or not, that is something that objective personality does claim. Dave and Shan are both using TE, and Jack, I'm sorry, you're just not. You're not, at least in socionics, you're not using it in a valued spot.
Okay, one, I know people who do use it in a valued spot. My friend Peter is someone who I've talked to at length, and Rita, both people use extroverted thinking, extroverted logic in valued positions. One is a leading function, the other one is a suggestive function. And I've learned a great deal about extroverted logic from talking to them. Second, extroverted logic would be my demonstrative function in the socionic system, at least, which means it's the strongest non-valued element. It is very much a part of me, even though it's not something I value intrinsically. So I think if you subscribe to the idea, this idea, which I still think is flawed, this idea that a type can, but only those of a certain types can best explain this different cognitive functions, information elements. If you subscribe to that idea, then I should be well qualified as an ILE, at least in the socionic system, to talk about socionics extroverted logic. But moreover, I think that any type with enough experiences, talking to different people, different types, but also understanding how the theory has been described by people who themselves have talked to people who have different types, they can learn, at least academically, what these different information elements are and how they play out. Perhaps there's something to be said about someone who's got as a vulnerable function may have more of a difficulty, but I think at least demonstrated should give you a perfectly good viewpoint on it. And also, when you say it has to be a valued spot, well, are we going to be suggesting, at least in the socionic system, that someone who is extroverted logic suggestive is going to have more of an understanding of extroverted logic than someone who's extroverted logic demonstrative? That's quite a questionable claim. I'm not entirely sure I am on board with it. But anyway, I think the initial principle is flawed, that you need to value a certain information element to be able to talk about it in some sort of as some sort of authority. I think it's something which is about knowledge, what you've learnt, what you understand about the information elements from seeing them play out in other people, and also you can see it play out in yourself in a multitude of different ways, depending on which function slot you're in. It's not limited to just extroverted logic valuing types.
So they would be a much better authority on TE, but from what I've seen, TE is not necessarily a tribe-focused function, but it's an objective-focused function, and part of that means.
Okay. Well, I think that change is reasonable. It's just because they do call it tribe. They say self versus tribe. It's a very clear terminology which they use. So I think it's fine if we then can adapt and adjust that meaning. But then, as you say, you're not the authority. Dave and Shannon are the authority. I guess what I'd have to do is talk to Dave and Shannon about that issue and see if they also change their mind on this.
That other TE users will see the same thing because of the fact that it's objective, and because of the fact that they're all seeing the same kind of extroverted logic. One of the things I've seen TE users do, and this is people that I've met in real life, that they might not even be aware of it, is that they are getting everybody else on board with a plan before going to execute it. Where I, as a TI user, I've seen that I don't do that. I just go and do what I think is best without checking with anyone or without making sure everyone else agrees. Or
Okay. Now, this all goes back to the nub of the question: what criteria are you using to type these people? If you've typed them according to the criteria of tribe thinking, then it would make sense that they would be consulting with other people before they make any sort of decision, because you've typed them as tribe thinking, not extroverted thinking in a way which is recognizable in Jung or recognizable in socionics or most other Jungian typology theories. So we need to know how you type these people first off, the people you've talked to. And that's always the issue, really, when we go back to anecdote, who we've talked to. I've talked to people who I think are extroverted logic. Are my experiences less valid? I get to say, well, I'm talking about OP extroverted thinking, you're talking about socionics extroverted logic, which is, okay, fair enough. But in which it takes me back to that issue, how are we actually working out how someone is an extroverted thinking type in the OP system? What are the criteria? Is it that we're going to tribe thinking first? Is that the idea? That they're tribe and therefore they're thinking or feeling? Well, they're thinking under tribe, therefore that's how you work it out using these coins. In which case it's no surprise that they're going to be consulting people. But are these people then going to be extroverted thinking saviors? Are they actually going to be extroverted thinking in a way which is recognizable across other Jungian typologies, or are they just going to be extroverted thinking in OP and none of the others? That's what I want to find out. It remains to be seen. I've looked at one video so far, this person called Monica, and it was interesting. She wasn't really talking about the sort of tribal aspect, this sort of sacrificing herself for for what works for everyone. Now, Binyamin was interviewing her, and he pushed that towards her as an interpretation, but she herself was talking about applicability, about things being applicable for her. So it's interesting, at least, that those who I've seen who do seem to be talking about extroverted logic sorts of things, who have been typed extroverted thinking in OP, those ones don't seem to be talking about the tribe aspect so much. But when I do see those who are talking about the tribe aspect a lot, say as one girl I saw, who I mentioned in the video, she didn't seem like an extroverted logic leading type in socionics at all. So it still remains something to be explored further.
Or something like that, because of course everyone will agree it's the best thing to do, right? Well, for them, it's not best unless everyone else is on board. What's best is what we can actually succeed together doing. So there is a tribe element to it from what I've seen.
Okay, so there is a point to be made that yes, what is best, if you are in a team, if you are situated within a team and you have to work with that team, that it would be better to consult with that team to some extent so that you can make a best decision using your team. I think that makes sense, but that is also highly situational. So this whole idea about extroverted thinking being about tribe. Now, what happens if you take that same pragmatic way of thinking, what works the best, and you put someone, say, on an island where they don't have people? Let's take Robinson Crusoe, for example. This character, someone who's highly practical, highly pragmatic, who was washed up on an island and had to live on his own for years. How did he manage? Well, he used what I would say is extroverted logic, but he wasn't consulting anyone else. He was working things out himself, how to make it work, how to build these sorts of tree houses and other sort of devices to get by. Now, it will definitely be about observing how things work and improving processes to make things work better in his environment so he could survive. That isn't going to be anything to do with a tribe. You can't consult the tribe. But it clearly would suggest that these sorts of things do not depend on consulting other people. It depends on situation. If it's the case that you're with other people and it would be better for things to work by consulting other people, then sure. But I thought we're talking about thinking as tribe thinking, extra thinking as tribe thinking. If it really is about tribe thinking, then you shouldn't be able to detach the use of thinking from the consultation of the tribe. If you can, then it's not implicit. It is some other, it's an extrinsic use in certain circumstances. That should not be enough to weigh up against extroverted feeling, which does seem to be intrinsically about these interactions with people to some extent. So, you need to, as I said before, you have to balance. If you're both putting them under tribe, you have to balance them. You have to say, right, they're both satisfying that tribe equally. Now, you could then say, oh, no, it's not about them both being tribe, it's about them being objective to some degree. Fair enough, but that's not what Dave and Shannon say. That's not what the theory says. If you change your mind on it, then fine. Just say you changed your mind, fine. The theory is now going to be changed. Well, as you said yourself, you're not the authority to do it.
It might not be as strong as objective personality says, but again, I'm not using TE. They're using TE. I'm going to learn TE from TE users, not from Jack and not from some theory that someone cooked up in their basement based on looking at their spouse. I'm sorry.
Theory is someone cooked up in the basement. I mean, Ausra Agustinaviciuti was an academic. She was a sociologist. She would lecture in these subjects. She would have an academic background. She understood how to collect data, how to do research. She wasn't just someone in their basement. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but isn't Dave Superpowers someone who also worked on a theory in his house? He had no psychological training. He just tried things out and saw what seemed to work for him. Why are you suggesting that Ausra Agustinaviciuti, this lecturer in sociology, this academic, that someone who comes from a clearly academic background, is very much respected in Eastern Europe, why is she now being put on some sort of lesser footing as someone who works, just sorted things out in the basement? That's, I don't know, it seems a bit misplaced to me. But It suggests you don't necessarily understand her background, which is fair enough. You don't know much about socionics. I don't know very much about OP. I've been learning quite a bit, but that's how it is.
And that said, socionics, I'm sure, has a lot of good things to bring to the table. And I'm not trashing socionics in any way, just that
well, I mean, we just said before, so it sounded a little bit like it, but I can understand if you're a bit upset.
They need to be accountable to something as well. And he's saying that Dave and Chen aren't publishing peer-reviewed papers. Well, first and foremost, peer review is not the ultimate authority on truth. And I said during our debate that the reason why the internet, socionics, objective person...
Yeah, but peer review is pretty much a basic criteria for something to be recognised as scientific. The point is, it is objective personality which is going out there and calling itself objective. Socionics isn't calling itself objective. It's calling itself a theory which is about understanding how personality works from certain principles and also certain observations. Now, that has elements of objectivity, has elements of subjectivity. There's always going to be an interpretive aspect to it that's very important. And the way we do socionics, we accept there is very much a subjective aspect. There is an interpretation that goes on. It's not going to be a perfect methodology. It's as good as we can. We'd like to make it better, of course. That's fine. But we're not going around calling ourselves an objective personality. By doing that, you are asserting that there is something beyond, that there is no contamination of personal biases and subjective experiences in the creation of your theory. Not just the methodology, but just the creation of the theory, how the different concepts are defined. And so far I've yet to see a shred of evidence that any of these concepts, as defined, actually came from some sort of empirical study. You said, oh, we found some patterns. So did Auschwitz. He found patterns. Everyone finds patterns. That's what people do. Why do you think that is any better than what all the other typologies are doing?
Personality, all this stuff is coming out is because the academic world has dropped the ball. They are not publishing peer-reviewed papers on typology. They are...
Well, it's not that they've dropped the ball, it's that they've moved towards Big Five and other sorts of personality. It's not a question of, oh, academics aren't publishing this stuff anymore, they've dropped the ball. Why can't we maybe pool together our resources someday and get such academic journals published? Why is it that even those who do have the resources, those who are actually professors, I speak of, for instance, of Dario Nardi, for instance, despite having the means to publish peer-reviewed journal articles, aren't actually doing so and are avoiding peer review? I think that can tell you quite a lot. Now, me for myself, I probably don't have the money to do that. I'm not a professor at university yet. I am a psychologist. I do have master's degrees, but I don't yet have the financial resources to fund the sort of experiments I would like to fund. Say, a psychological asymmetry experiment using operationalized methods of determining strength in different information elements for certain tasks. Calculating z-scores, comparing the z-scores to find out if there's some sort of natural gap that, if for instance you are scoring very highest in the extrovert intuition test, that you're going to score lowest in the introvert sensation test. That sort of thing I think would be very helpful. Could be very helpful. I'd like to see that happen. No, these are things we'd like to do. These are things which I'd like to see and embrace. But the point is, until I'm doing that and actually finding the evidence that would support this in some sort of empirical way, I'm not going to go around calling myself objective. I know there are flaws. I'm aware of these flaws. Why is objective personality at the moment suggesting that it doesn't have these flaws? And why is it using this self-created moniker of objective to then put down other typologies, which it doesn't know much about?
Look, they're all in on the Big Five, which is fine, but it's a self-testing method. So, I mean, I'm sure eventually they might come out with peer review, but the fact that they're not doesn't mean they're wrong. And the fact...
Okay, so the Big Five is not really a method. I mean, when you say a method, do you mean a particular questionnaire, say the NEOPIR? And there are others as well. I've been building one recently for my job. The there's no reason why Big Five has to be self-testing. Big Five is just an idea, the five-factor framework. That could be tested through all sorts of methods. It doesn't have to be the NEOPIR, which is, yes, a self-tested questionnaire. You could do a 360. No reason why you can't. This is another thing. There seems to be a difficulty with distinguishing a methodology for working something out and the theory itself. They are different things. We need to speak of them as if they're different things.
That we're having an open discourse like this is, in my opinion, more dynamic and more natural than peer review. Peer review works for things like physics, where two people can do the same.
It is dynamic and more natural, but at the end of the day, if you're going to start calling yourself objective, then we need to go via the scientific process. If not, what ground do you have to stand on? Why should people believe you when you say you're objective? What have you done to show that? And, beyond trust in Dave and Shannon, look, I think Dave and Shannon are absolutely lovely people. But I don't need to place my full trust in whatever they say. I need to respect them as people who are human beings, who are capable of fallibility. I can't turn them into gods. And I need to be able to question. I need to be able to say, okay, you say a claim like it's something being objective. I want to see the evidence. I want to see what makes it objective.
Same kind of test and get the same results. It works in chemistry, it works in biology, it works in maybe psychological studies as well, where they can come out with statistical analysis.
It definitely works in psychological studies. That's what we do. I'm a psychologist. We do peer reviews. This is what psychologists do. Now, these are psychologists, more research psychologists, I should say, people who work at university rather than more practitioners like myself. But I would like to do this for a PhD. I just need to have resources, need to have the time to do it.
For this at the moment, until they're checking it against DNA, or they're checking it against something like brain scans, MRI machines, or EEG machines. There's no way to...
Oh, looking at you, Dario. Haha.
...to actually produce a peer-reviewed paper. For now, we just have to trust that Dave and Shan were not able to type people, and then by adding more and more coins, they were able to agree on type better and better. And just the fact that they're not trying to define the functions.
I'm not sure if that's what... I mean, I watched the interview with Dave, which you gave early last year actually, and he didn't say that's what the coins did. He said that after having typed people, at least rather well to begin with, he found that there are other coins maybe to introduce which made account of certain differences in within the types. I think that's what he said. If you are typing someone using coins and they're not working, and then you have to introduce more coins to then be able to type people using the first coins, how do you even know your first coin's even right? You could easily have discarded that first coin before having to add a second coin to make your first coin reliable. Your first coin should be reliable in and of itself. Otherwise, you're not iteratively building a reliable system. If you have one coin and that coin is unreliable, it's leading to bad typings, you need another coin to make the system reliable. That seems quite questionable to me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding here, but let's continue.
We don't have to go and learn the definitions from objective personality. What you learn from objective personality is not how to define the functions, it's how to type people. And it's how to get...
But if you don't know the definitions of the functions, then how can you type people? You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know how to pick out one thing from another. You could see, I don't know, certain words constructed, same way that people in Podler can see the warm wizard hands. You don't know what you're seeing is relevant or not. You don't know what you're looking at. You could be looking at, I don't know, squee, whatever squee is, and typing squee. You don't know if it's any sort of personality type. You don't know if it's actually got some sort of consistency to it. You're just typing whatever. It could be by sheer luck that you happen to end up with certain personality types. You'd be incredibly lucky, and even then, you may have hit upon some small part of it. perhaps not in a way which actually works in a certain amount of order. There are a near infinite amount of things you can see regularly occurring in the body, in the communication, in conversation. You have to narrow that down to the things which are of relevance. If not, you're going to be lost in the noise. So you need to sort of define what you're going to be looking at, what you're going to be trying to look for. If not, there's going to be all sorts of chaos.
Get the same type. And so then once you have an assortment of 50 people using TE, you can go and ask them, what is TE for you? What is TE for you? And get the data.
Well, but how do you know they're using TE if you haven't defined what TE is? How did you type them to know that they're TEing? Or how did they show TE? How did you work out that they are TE users? If you only worked it out by saying that those are tribe thinking, then of course you're just going to get people who are tribe thinking. They're going to show you tribe thinking. They won't necessarily show you extroverted thinking. Right? Unless you're using a factor analysis, an exploratory factor analysis, you're not going to be able to find what you're looking for if you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what that looks like. You may happen upon something, and you may then say, oh, that's the thing you're always looking for. But you don't know that. You go into the woods looking for a heffalump. You find a rabbit, and you declare, that rabbit must be the heffalump. And then you build your entire understanding of heffalumps based on that rabbit. And other rabbits which you come along, and suddenly you have lots of rabbits, and you can talk to those rabbits and ask them, rabbits. Well, no, you say, heffalumps, tell me all about heffalumps. And of course, rabbits will sniff and sort of bounce around as rabbits do, and that will be how you learn about heffalumps. It doesn't work.
The analysis. And I guess what you have to do is let reality tell you what it is. You can't tell reality what it is. And this is just basic understanding of what reality is. That you can't say, okay, this is what there is, and now I'm going to go out and look for it and find my confirmation bias there.
Again, in this, you could use an exploratory factor analysis and just see what divides up. That's what Big Five did, using a lexical methodology. Unless you're doing something like that, you need some sort of schema to look through the noise to find some kind of signal. You need something. What is extroverted thinking? How do you know? You need some sort of schema. You need something to think of. Jung had a schema. Do you think he just came up with thinking and feeling? He had the idea of it from philosophy going way back. The idea of the heart and the head. And the idea of these two elements pulling against one another, as Plato set out. This is, these ideas are old stuff. That's why what he used that schema to make sense of it. It's a whole philosophical background. You can't just sort of chuck that away and then just go and try to look at reality and see if you can find your heffalumps. You're going to find anything, and you have to call that the heffalump because that's the first thing you came across, or the first thing which happens to suit your intuitions, and you're just pretending that it's not your intuitions which are suiting. You're just pretending it's not a pre-existing schema. It is hard to believe.
No. What you got to do is you got to be open, not bring your biases to the table when you're going to look and see what TE actually is.
Yep, that's the part that's hard to believe. Very hard to believe. If you don't know what you're looking for and you happen across something, and you say that's your extroverted thinking, if it bears even some resemblance to what someone might also think, but you don't actually know what you're looking for in the first place, that says actually you did have some element of bias. Even when you're saying you're not, you're just being objective.
A lot of, in his response video, what he was saying was flavored using his own functions. So facts, just putting it out there, facts is not thinking. Facts just...
Okay, so flavored using my own functions. Relevance? I mean, my points are points. If they are good points, then they should change people's minds. If they're bad points, then critique them. But my type, what was the relevance? Why should it matter? Does it mean that it's wrong because it just happens to be flavored by my type? I call that an ad hominem. But yeah.
Just are, right? It's a fact that I was born 1981, for example, right? So that,
Okay, about facts. So when we read Jung's psychological types, he uses facts for both extroverted sensation and extroverted thinking. So when you think about what exactly is being talked about when we're talking about facts, facts can be both. But in what context are facts extroverted sensation? In what context are facts extroverted thinking? In the context of extroverted sensation, it's the observation. For instance, everything around me, these are all facts. I can see there's a red vase behind me. I see there's a white ceiling above me. I'm seeing things. Those are facts. Extroverted sensation. But we also have facts of extroverted logic, extroverted thinking. This is about how we handle the facts, how we build up our knowledge bases, how we get to an understanding of truth. Whether that is about accumulating all these different data points piecemeal and doing what seems to work from these various data points. Now that would be more extroverted logic. Or is it about, as I've said before, drawing the constellation through the data points, finding some sort of form or structure which will the best explains the data points with the fewest number of principles, where it's the most coherent and elegant. That would be more introverted logic. So there's a difference between the facts themselves and how the facts are handled, which is what I'm talking about. A focus on handling the facts for extroverted logic.
that's a fact, right? It's not thinking. It's an observation, right? Thinking might use facts, but
Yeah.
for him and for SI users, facts hold a lot more weight because for them, that's their takeaway. They're going to use their extroverted intuition and to mull over all of the different possibilities and then come out with a fact, which is the one possibility that actually is, right?
I wouldn't use. No, I wouldn't just mull over different possibilities and come up with a fact. I would be open to different possibilities. The whole point of extrovert intuition that it remains open to different possibilities. Well, I don't know. Maybe as I am the authority on extrovert intuition because I'm the one who values it, I could tell you what extrovert intuition is. It's silly, but yeah, that doesn't quite chime with my understanding, but okay.
And or if I botch that definition, I'm sorry, but I just know facts
Okay,
hold a different
fine.
amount
At least
of
it's consistent.
weight to people using introverted sensation, which I'm not using. I'm using introverted thinking, and for me, facts are what I take in. Facts are I would like an abundance of facts, and I don't trust facts. Facts are not trustworthy until I've seen the pattern behind them, and then I can say, okay, these facts fit the pattern. These facts don't. Maybe the pattern's wrong. Maybe the facts are wrong, right? And that's the idea of being a double observer, that I can actually test my intuition versus my facts and throw out and assign weight to which ones are more accurate and less accurate, right? And that's just what TI does. It's comparing things for contradictions and for trying to find what's actually true between the two. So I don't like his interpretation at all, bringing facts into thinking. That's just not what.
I remember you told me off a little while back because I said I didn't like something you were doing. And you said, oh, you'll bring your subjectivity into the argument. I know, I gave you kudos for being consistent before, but this isn't very consistent, Binyamin. I thought better.
Thinking might use facts, but it's not what it does. And same thing with logic. Thinking might use logic, but F-dominant people can use logic. It doesn't mean they can't. Just thinking uses logic a lot more, so they might end up being better at that. The other thing he went off on is the similarities and things. He was against similarities. He was against Jackie was against.
What do you mean by went off on? I didn't have a get my knickers in a twist. I had made a point. It wasn't like you seem more emotionally excited than I was in that in my video.
Putting finding the similarities between TE and FE, right? Which they're both extroverted judging functions, so there's got to be some similarities there. The reason.
Okay, But what are those similarities? You say there's got to be a similarity. Why has it got to be tribe when it doesn't quite make sense for extroverted thinking? It doesn't seem to apply to extroverted thinking as much as extroverted feeling, and the only examples you can give are highly situational examples. So yeah, there'd be something similar between them. In socionics, we have an idea of how they're similar. They're both about the adaptive accumulation of oughts, which is quite academic. It is academic. We don't use that very much to type people because the real meat of socionics, like as Jung said, is in the actual cognitive functions or information elements themselves. That's where the things which are distinct and meaningful come out. Some of the dichotomies they happen to share, say extrovertedness, rationality, and being dynamic. Yes, it's good for explaining their approach, but the approach to what? And it's the what that's important. The what is the sensation, the intuition, the logic, and the ethics. That is the thing which carries meaning. The similar sort of approach to very different things. Now, you might say, that approach is going to be tribiness, but again, we've looked at those differences between extroverted feeling, extroverted thinking. We still haven't found a very a way in which extroverted thinking is fundamentally about the tribe.
The reason why he's against similarities is because he's using NE. He's not valuing similarities in things. He's not valuing the narrowing down of the intuition. He likes the variant.
Now this is no, this isn't right. I do value similarities. I'm just looking for the right kinds of similarities. So, for instance, there's a remarkable similarity, once you look deep enough, between extroverted ethics and introverted logic. They're both what I like to call clarity seeking. The idea they're both about digitizing information in some way. Extroverted ethics about clear expressions of emotion, which can mean a slight exaggeration of the facts. And introverted logic is also digitizing the information, not remaining in analog, by, you say, creating these sorts of coherent patterns, finding these ways of these clear categories, which and where you may treat people according to those categories, everyone in that category the same way, rather than one person differently to another in some sort of arbitrary way. Again, it's digitizing information. That's a similarity. I'm not afraid of similarities. I like similarity. I like finding them. But I need to find ones which are convincing. I don't like similarities which are forced. They need to sort of work. They need to apply similarly in equal respects. And as I've said, with extroverted thinking as tribe, it seems to be only really be applied in quite constructed, forced examples, situation examples, not something fundamental. Whereas extroverted feeling, it does seem to apply fundamentally, because of the idea of value originating in their moods, responses, reactions of other people, and the expression of emotion to those people. You can't really take people out of extroverted ethics. You can take people out of extroverted logic. So, yeah.
He likes the differences, and that's what he's going to be putting emphasis on. And it's just really funny that he knows about cognitive functions, but yet he's still biased and letting the cognitive functions influence his picture of reality.
Again, this is one big ad hominem. I'm pointing it out, critique it. Instead, what you're doing is you're inventing something about how extrovert intuition works, saying it's all about differences rather than similarities, where naturally I like to be looking for similarities. I'm looking for how, the potential in other people where we can actually come together and be included and incorporate new perspectives. I like that. I like to find out how that could work in a way which is consistent. I'm not just trying to push things away and say, I'm different to you in this way. I like the combination of similarities and contrasts, which I think is something you find with extroverted intuition and introverted logic together. I don't just look for differences. So you're inventing how extroverted intuition works here, and you're using that in an ad hominem against me to reduce the strength of my argument, rather than actually pick apart the argument itself. It's a bit unbecoming.
So I was just, I got cut out there on my video recording software, but I was in the middle of saying how Jack was letting his cognitive functions influence his picture of reality. So another point I have is where he came out against introverted sensing as meaning. Now, that is something that I just recently learned. It's not something that objective personality holds, so it's on me. And I learned it from a few people that were using SI, and that's what they identified SI to be. I was trying to learn about SI from people, which is the way I go about it.
So let me just get this straight. So you were talking to Jamie Wilson, and Jamie Wilson, when you asked her what SI was, she said, "Oh, SI, it's about meaning. It's about finding meaning in things." I'm very skeptical that that happened. If someone can find the video clip where she actually said that, I'd like to see. I've reached out to Jamie. I know she's been a bit busy recently, but I would really like to investigate that. I've interviewed Jamie. I've talked to Jamie, and what came out quite clearly was her desire for positive experiences in life, to reduce awkwardness, to reduce uncomfortableness, things to be nice and pleasant and enjoyable, and that sort of taking the most satisfaction in what life has to offer, and not what I get from meaning, which is a certain dissatisfaction with life, and looking for some sort of higher, more important thing behind the experience of our day-to-day, and they're reveling in what the day-to-day has to offer. So yeah, I'm not sure that's right. We'll have to see. What I do know, though, from looking at some of your videos, Binyamin, is that you do have a habit of pushing what you want to hear onto a person. You ask them, "Oh, is this the thing which I want you to say? Is this it?" And they go, "Oh, yes, I guess, yes, maybe." And that is what you take as your conclusion. It's a very bad approach to interviewing people, I'm afraid to say. It's not your fault. I mean, unless you're trained in how to give interviews, that can often happen. It's a learning I had to make, and now I do interviewing people for a job. It's the first thing they pointed out to me: "Jack, you're leading people with your questions. You've got to learn how to not do that. You've got to be very careful about the effects that can have on people, because people, most cases, when they're asked something by an interviewer, their response is to not upset the other person. Most people, they want to say, oh, they're more likely to agree, especially if they haven't really thought it through. Some types is less often the case. So if I'm vanilla, I might very much not do that. But most types are inclined to think, oh, if I'm not really sure and they're asking me this thing quite confidently, I'll probably sort of say yes because it's easier, rather than sort of stop and think and hold everything down for a couple of minutes while we think through what you just said and whether it actually applies to them. So maybe that's what happened. I'm not sure.
Especially if I know they were typed SI and I agree with their typing on SI, and I see the SI in them, then I can go and learn. And one of the things, SI I think is a very misunderstood function across the typing community, especially since
very true.
we don't have many SI users here. I've noticed that SI comes off as very shallow and simple and basic, and people really disrespect it when SI users are talking.
Unfortunately,
but from my close encounters with SI users, they're very deep people, very special and deep people that have a lot of depth on the sensory information. And what I've just heard.
Okay, but what do you mean by depth on the sensory information? As I said before, it should not be going so deep that it goes away from the concrete and towards the abstract. That's where we've moved into something else. When we say depth of sensation, what I would expect to say is refining the quality of that sensation. Having that sort of richness of experience of the day-to-day, finding the pleasure in those details, finding the appreciation of those sorts of things. That's what I see as the depth. I see as a richness. To see the world through their eyes is something quite exceptional. I should know I'm getting married to someone who I sincerely believe is an introverted sensation leading type. I'm going to be interviewing her actually on my channel in a little bit, and hopefully it will be a good chance for people to see what I think is an introverted sensation type, one I know very intimately and well. So yeah, I mean, we need to be careful about what we're crossing over here, what zones of information we're crossing over here. When you talk about deep, what do you mean by deep? Do you mean deep as in, oh, deep, man, that gets to the fundamental nature of the universe deep? If we're going like that, then we're getting a bit more introverted intuition-y, I'd say, not introverted sensation. Introverted sensation is more about immersing oneself in the finest quality of a day-to-day, not about detaching oneself from the day-to-day to some sort of deeper thing underlying everything. We need to be careful about that.
Heard from them is that this is just from them, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what they say. They say that there is a lot of meaning behind what they what they see in the physical world.
Okay, okay. There could be something to that. I'd like to hear what you mean. Let's listen a bit more.
And they're always stacking and adding more and more meaning. Now, this is not what objective personality says. Objective personality just says, well, we're going to catch these people by...
Yep. Okay. I wanted to hear what they mean by meaning. One thing you should always do when you're interviewing is when someone gives you an interesting word like meaning, you don't just push your own interpretation onto that. You don't know what meaning means to them. What is meaning? You can't just say, oh, that must be some sort of deep thing. What is meaning when someone with introverted sensation uses it? What does that mean to them? You've got to ask them. What do they mean by that? What do you mean by me? Could you explain a little bit more? So they can give you some examples. They give you some details. They can give you something which can help illuminate their unique perspective. You can't just take that and say, oh, they care about meaning. You need to know what meaning means.
By seeing them organizing the sensory, right? And I'm really dumbing it down. They understand the cognitive functions much more than they let on, or that they're trying to teach people, but they're really just trying to teach people how to type, not what the functions are. And this is what Jack doesn't get. They're not trying...
As I said, you can't type people unless you know what you're looking for. You're finding rabbits when you're looking for heffalumps.
To define the functions. They're trying to teach you how to type people, which is two completely different things. You just need to understand how to catch people. Now, will they get people wrong this way? Probably, because everyone can act in any way. One of the things I've seen is they're getting a lot of feminine FE people wrong, from what I've seen, right? Just because the feminine FE is really good at chameleoning and pretending to speak in the language of the person they're speaking to. It's not...
Okay, well, if you say we're getting feminine people wrong, I think that's something which we need to look at perhaps a bit more, talk that over a bit more. But when you say, I've typed someone who's feminine wrong, who have I typed wrong? And why have I typed them wrong? Is it that they fit a feminine type in your system? Okay, well, we'll take what your system uses to describe the phenomena, compare it to how I describe the phenomena using the socionic system, and see which one actually provides a better explanation. That's probably the way of doing it. There's no point me saying, oh, you typed them wrong in your system. I'm not doing that to you. I think it's a bit discourteous, and two, it's wrong. You have your parameters, I have my parameters. It's a question then of comparing the parameters, see if they actually lead to better explanations, better ways of explaining personality type. Yeah, you can be different types in different systems because they use different parameters. But I have a feeling, Binyamin, that you feel that your way is the only way of looking at typology, which is, okay, you think yours is right, fine. But it's still worth taking on board that we've got certain parameters. We type people in our methodology, and by the rules of our methodology, it is right. It is a legitimate socionics typing. It may be that socionics typings themselves aren't all that good, but it's right by the rules of socionics. But whether socionics is not that good or not, that still remains to be seen. You can't get there just by saying that our typings are wrong from your OP perspective, and vice versa. In the same way, for instance, if I recall, David Shannon typed Barack Obama as a feminine ESTP, feminine extrovert sensation, ESTP. Now, on the surface, that looks utterly ludicrous, but they have their rules. The rules might not make too much sense to all of us, but they have their rules for typing him. They typed him in ESTP. Now, if you were to contest that, you need to contest that within the rules of OP, because it's an OP typing. Meanwhile, in sociologics, we can say he's an IEI because we can see the wealth of evidence suggesting he is not good at taking some sort of decisive action in the present moment. That's his weakness. Instead, he was someone who's very much reflective, very much long-sighted, saw his time in the presidency as about achieving longer-term idealistic aims, which he unfortunately didn't have the drive through to necessarily realise, especially around the environment, where he did a lot of work towards that. And he was often criticised as someone who led from behind because he was a strategist, not a tactician. So, and we can find in his journals these reflections on the broader and greater meaning behind how he got into the presidency. Lots of introvert intuition showing up there. So that's our evidence for why he's an IEI. Let's see if you were to then take the evidence, you could then come to a different conclusion for his type in OP. But I'm not going to assume you just got him wrong in OP. I don't know because I don't. I haven't memorized all the rules in OP for typing people. So, I'm not going to start saying you got it wrong in your own system. As I said, it's most likely wrong to do that sort of thing, and it's a bit discourteous as well across the different typologies.
Not even pretending, they just genuinely do this. They're really good at bridging that gap and talking to someone in a way that the other person can understand, which I think is really great, but at the same time it makes it harder to type them, right? Anyways, so that's just about the SI point. Works of art and literature are not real people, Jack. I just got to put that in there. You just can't type, you can't learn about functions from works of art, from characters in works of art, right? Maybe the author has a certain type, and maybe he describes a character with that same type, so maybe you can see some insight into his psyche, right, from that. But don't go and learn functions. Like, maybe you might be right. You could learn from fictional.
Okay, so strawmanning my point a bit there, maybe because I didn't make myself very clear. The idea of the archetypes showing up in works of art, it's not about a single creator, a single author. It's about tropes. It's about recurring images, recurring themes, recurring characters, stock characters in these various archetypes. Not just taking a specific example, it's taking lots of different examples that all show certain recurring character traits, because these are the certain kinds of characters we as a society tend to pick out as being important, pick out as being salient. That has something important there. You can't just ignore that. You can't say, oh, it's not real, so let's just forget about it. This is a distillation of reality. This is how we've taken our various experiences and individuals and write about them in particular works of art, and those over time coalesce into certain stock characters because they recur again and again and again. Many authors of different types see these different similar characters, similar kinds of people, and they show them in their characters as their stories, in the stories as their characters. That is something meaningful. There is something there. I think it's foolish to ignore that there's something there. I'm not saying you should derive your cognitive functions from that either. That's not what I'm saying. And I said this in my comment before, but if anything you read, I think you went and you just went on your video despite my comment, or you just didn't read it. That's fine. You're busy wanting to make your video. But the emphasis is that it's not about using this to derive your cognitive functions. It's when you're putting together an understanding of these cognitive functions through observations of people, you should look to what the most thematic elements of information are, how people have presented them, how people have put them together. And you should look at it and treat that as your guiding star. You should say to yourself, hang on, my definition of moving far away from this is not resembling this at all. Maybe that's a reason to pause for thought and think, maybe I've got the wrong idea of this, maybe I'm heading down the wrong direction. And if you are finding actually is lining up, that may be a suggestion, oh, maybe I'm working the right direction. The themes I'm picking out in people are themes which the many hundreds of people, thousands of people who've written about different characters across various cultures have also seen, have also picked out. That is something. That is relevant. It's significant. And you think Carl Jung didn't also recognize as being significant? This is what the collective unconscious is about. These archetypes which people talk about and refer to, these common characters, the warrior, the hero, the senex. This is because these characters, these archetypes appear again and again in what we talk about in our understanding of the human journey, the human consciousness, human condition. It's important. And when Jung was putting together his ideas of thinking, feeling, as I've said, intuition, sensation, he was looking at philosophical underpinnings, what people in the past have discussed about different ideas, how different information had been separated up. There's a whole backlog of work that's been done already, and you can't just throw that away and start completely afresh. I mean, well, you can, but the likelihood of you going wrong is incredibly likely. Incredibly likely. It's foolhardy. You could try. See how it works out.
Characters, what type is. But Jack, come on, learn from reality, not from fiction, please. Like, just take what you learn from fiction with a grain of salt. Honestly, this is like, I don't even know why you would promote this. This is not This is not like. Can you just imagine someone going to learn physics from Jules Verne, a novel, time travel, and like, am I getting?
Well, why? I don't understand what the similarity is. Why would you? One, that's a single author. Two, the whole point of physics and about time travel and other sorts of things like that. These are physical processes people had hardly any experience of. We don't understand how the world works. We're trying to figure it out, trying to piece it together, have different theories. But that's not the same as encountering people and describing people, because people have been talking to people for hundreds of thousands of years. There's so much data there in our common collective consciousness. What we've put together, what we talk about, how we understand people, it's all there. We've been doing it for so long. You can't compare that to physics. We've only been doing physics for the last few hundred years, and even then we didn't even think about the idea of time travel until recently. It's completely incomparable. It's not a good analogy.
I'm going to go learn about physics from Star Trek? Honestly, most of it's science fiction for a reason. Like, it's fiction for a reason. So, I think you can learn from it, but it's got to be really well written and really solid. And even then, they're not real people, Jack. They're just not. Like,
no, I say they're distillations of people, distillations of hundreds of thousands of people, many people, distinct types, stock types, sorts of people. This is what it's all about. If you're missing what it's all about, then you're going astray.
Please, please don't ever do this again. Don't ever promote learning about type from works of fiction, okay?
Why are you so upset? Now, I know you're not deliberately mishandling what I said, and not deliberately making a straw man. I mean, you wouldn't be so upset if you were. I think it might be worth sitting and thinking about what I said, what the implications are, thinking it through a little bit more, so that you understand where I'm coming from. Because I don't think you understand yet. I think you got some idea of what I said, which is different, and that is causing you to have this sort of reaction, get a bit worked up, which is, it's understandable if there's something you care about and I'm sort of trampling on it in your head because you've misinterpreted what I'm saying, and that's fine. Or you do have some sort of understanding. Well, no, because you're making a strong man now. You're making a stronger point if you did understand what I was saying. Yeah. No, give it some more thought, Binyamin. Give it some more thought.
You just can't derive functions conclusively from characters in art. Okay, the last thing, Jack says a lot. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense. Okay, first of all, the fact that something makes sense or doesn't make sense doesn't make it real. Just look at quantum physics, for example. Just the fact that quantum physics doesn't make sense to anyone, yet they still use it because it's accurate and it works, should say something. So don't ever bring in an argument, this makes sense, that's why it's true, and this doesn't make sense. That's just really bad TI, Jack. Come on. That's just bad logic in general, okay?
Well, no, actually, when people say that it makes sense and the idea of clicking together in their heads, you say these sets of patterns, these areas of coherence, that would be TI. That is what TI is oriented towards doing. It's extroverted thinking, which is going to be and saying, oh, what happens to coalesce into a pattern is meaningless. It's what is shown to actually work. That's extroverted thinking. But that's not what I'm doing. My arguments aren't just it makes sense. I'm making points. And then I say, okay, my argument also made sense. I'm making a statement about it, and people either agree or they think, no, it doesn't make sense, actually. Look at this, look at that. The saying it makes sense isn't the argument itself. It's my statement on the argument I've just made. If I think that's the case, I have to look back and check.
So those are my points. The other thing is, Jack hasn't mentioned that him and I are starting to explore this a little bit deeper. We're starting to look at people who he's typing the same in socionics from people who were typed the same in OP, and we're going to try to derive our own understanding of the functions from those people and not take the definitions from socionics. And OP doesn't have definitions, but we're not going to take the definitions from OP. We're going to start fresh, figure out new definitions for the functions all over again, based on people that he's typed and OP has typed the same. And in this way, we're not projecting onto reality something that we've already decided. We are gathering from reality what actually is there, right? And I realize this is all subjective stuff. There's no way to be objective about it, but hopefully through.
So, for the record, I think this is a good idea what we're doing. There are some risks, though. So, for instance, for it to be truly workable, we need people who are typology naive. If we end up, for instance, me putting all the effort to sort of type people in OP, people who have been typed in OP, people who already much believe in OP and that it works, who are used to describing themselves in terms of OP, then it's going to be a non-starter. It's not going to actually work out so well, because all you do is when you talk to them, they're candidates who are already inculcated into OP, they'll describe themselves in terms of OP, and that will become what we end up settling on. Meanwhile, if we were to do the same thing with sociology, let's say Binyamin spent time typing all the people I've done through my interviews, and he came to he came to similar timings with me on, say, a small number of them. We talked to those people. People have been inculcated into socionics and use that. Then we ask them cognitive functions, they'll start talking about it in terms of socionics terms. So for us to really work, I think we really should be focusing on typology naive people. We could try it with people who aren't typology naive, but in which case we may need a bit more of a balance, and it might be worth looking to see in the two groups if you split into socionics groups and OP groups based on what they're inculcated and what theory they tend to make sense of their lives with, and then we can see, are they giving radically different responses despite the fact we agree on them being the same type. That would be interesting. It means we wouldn't get anywhere in terms of understand cognitive functions, but also understand about the potential for our methodology to fail. So, yeah, we need to be careful about that, Binyamin. We need to be careful about which people we are talking to, whether they are typology naive or not.
With this effort, we can sort of get to some kind of agreement in the middle. Anyways, have a good one. Thanks.
Thank you, Binyamin. Well, I think that was, well, pretty much what I expected. I'm not too surprised by that. Let's see what you guys think. Thank you for tuning in.